Well, good afternoon. Let's give another round of applause for these three fellows, will you?
Yeah.
Kirk, you feel like introducing yourselves, or does everybody here know who you are?
I think most of them probably know who we are. This kid at 4 over here on the Fred Cochran style banjo, and Chester McMillan here on the guitar,
and Kirk Sutphin on the 4-string Gutberger, the fiddle. We've been playing together for quite a few days now.
Yeah, we were all just kids way back when.
Way back when, yeah. So they are really representative of the very best of the string music that's coming from these counties, not just Surrey, but surrounding counties for centuries and centuries and centuries. And nobody plays a better guitar lick than Chet here. And nobody makes a better banjo than that funny looking fellow with the toilet seat badge up there. Hold that banjo up again. You notice that there are no frets going across that fingerboard? You get the slippy slide all the way up.
That's probably a very cocky place.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of made Fred one just exactly like that.
That's when they had a lot of toilet seat materials. And you notice that if Kirk will hold his fiddle up, notice that he doesn't have 4 tuners on his fiddle like you normally have, but you have geared tuners. And that was the thing that wasn't in the very earliest fiddles from the 1600s and 1700s and 1800s. It was probably came along when guitars came along, maybe? You have a theory about those geared tuners?
I don't know, probably came in the mid-1800s, I'm assuming. I know they made some old ones with bone buttons on them way back.
But of course you can't play old-time music unless you got those tuners.
It was the cool tuners.
So tell us where you got that tune from.
We got that one from Tommy, Jarrell, and But everybody around here played it. Ernest, East, and Fred, and all of them. That's just one of the standard tunes for this part of the world.
A tune that's endured, and endured. So, what's tune are you doing on the fiddle there, Kirk?
We're in high bass D.
You can't just tune it one way and leave it till the cows come home. Sometimes the cows might come home in the key of D, or the cows might come home in the key of A. So I'm Kevin Donleavy, and some years ago, with the help of a lot of local historians and local people, who shall go unnamed at this point, I started researching who played the old-time music in Surrey and Grayson and Wilkes and Rockingham and other counties. And I was living in Wisconsin then, even though I grew up in Georgia. And I thought, has anybody ever tried to put together a book about all the people who played in Surrey and the Low Gap area and the Gay Lakes area and the Fancy Gap area? And so I thought, well, I'll just sashay on down to North Carolina and Virginia, and I'll just write this book. It might take me a few months. Well, Lord God, I was here how many years? And so what I did was find out who played the fiddle, who played the banjo. Those were the two instruments I focused on. And somebody would say, "You never heard about Grandma Smith and the way that she played Fire on the Mountain?" I'd say, "No, never heard of her." And they'd say, "Take me down to her graveyard." So we'd go down to the old boneyard, and they'd say, "That's her grave, read the dates." Oh, she was born in 1812 and died in 1879, so I scribbled that down. So this procedure happened day after day after week after week after month after month, and my notebooks were getting fatter and fatter and fatter. I thought, Lord God, where am I going to cut this off anyhow? Okay, if you're really young, you don't get put in the book. If you're really old, you do get put in the book. So anyway, I interviewed about 50 or 60, I think, musicians who were still alive. I think only one of them is alive today. But the rest of the folks would say, I ain't no good, but my granddaddy was. And you should have heard so-and-so who was a good cock thumb banjo player. Let me show you where her house was or his house was. So Thornton Spencer would drive me around Washington County, and Calvin Cole would take me he and Vi would take me to graveyards saying, yeah, I played with old William. He was a cracker of a fiddle player. So instead of having just 60 or 70 musicians from around this area, I ended up with a book this size that had 1,300 musicians in it. Almost all fiddle players and banjo players. And I can tell by the fact that you're struck dead by that remark that was a pretty unusual thing, and you probably wouldn't have suspected, like none of us suspected, that many people would have played just those two instruments. Because guitars didn't come until later, and mandolins didn't come until later, and stand-up bass didn't come into a whole lot later. So the fiddle came first to these counties, and then the banjo came sneaking in, and the fiddle players would say, all right, you want to play with me? You better get to it, boy. Just don't step out in front of me, said Charlie to Scissors. And so what we have here is sort of two things. It's sort of a history of traditional American music in the country that you all know real well. And it looks like most of you have been living here all your lives. Well, I guess you haven't lived all your lives here. Or you'd be dead. Don't you ever get into my jokes? Come on. And so you had grandmas that played, and maybe you were Let's talk about some of the families and some of the women musicians in this county and other counties. If you like playing another tune?
What would you like to hear there, Mr. Peach?
Any tune you want to hear?
What do you call him, George? He was just a Georgia at one time.
In 1953.
Where's this peach from? Peach of Georgia.
He's always telling secrets on people. So if nobody speaks up, we'll let them pick the tune. All right, it's yours. Beep, beep, beep. Give him a hand, yeah. I want to read you just a couple of very short little snippets from this book here. Just give you a flavor of what the stories were like. Some people go through this book and they say, if I see another damn name in there, another birth date and death date, I'm throwing that book through the window. Can't take it anymore. And so I say, well, if you're a researcher, you look for your family in there. If you get tired of those names, you look for the good stories in there. And just ignore everything else, all that other trash. You look for the stories that they tell. Sometimes they'll talk about religion. Sometimes they'll talk about who married who. Sometimes they'll talk about doing the work on the farm, like raising tobacco or something. Other times they'll talk about the music. Other times they'll talk about things that I won't talk about over the microphone. Because yeah. Okay, so here are just a couple of little snippets, all right? Here's one from Surrey. I forget who's telling this story. This is Curtis Bruner, who knows where White Plains is. And I thought, so the rest of you might as well raise your hands because you know where it is by the end of the day. White Plains is about the size of New York City, and it's just below Mount Airy. And Kurt Bruner was a great old banjo player. And so he told this story about two people who live in that area. There used to be a man called Tom Roberts who was a banjo player, and I played with him. Then there was an Uncle Tom somebody or other who played. Both of them drank, and they both played for a frolic one night. And this was probably about 1920, 1930. Way about toward day, they started home. Tom got in the saddle, and that Uncle Tom fella got in behind him. Tom picking the banjo, and Uncle Tom playing the fiddle. The horse got running full speed. Must have liked the music. Near the woods there was a big mud hole. And when they got to that, the horse jumped it. The horse went on over to old man Roberts' farm then and went up to the gate. Tom turned around and said, "Uncle Tom, can you get down and open the gate?" And nobody answered. Tom looked around, he wasn't there. Tom went back, and there was Uncle Tom sitting on his behind in that mud hole. And he said, "By God, Tom, are we in tune?" That's what happens when you drink, I'm told. So there was some well-known musicians in the area. You're still laughing, aren't you? There were some well-known musicians in the area, as there still are. There were some who were really, really obscure. And some stories we found, just like somebody was saying today, I never knew that Aunt Harriet played the piano or the fiddle or anything else. Nobody in our family ever told us that. But somebody in the neighboring family, maybe the farm next door, said, "Hell yeah, she could play. She was a terror on the banjo. You don't know about that?" And she was saying, "Well, it's the first I heard about it." So finding out that you played, or you played, or you played, or you played, sometimes it was easy if you're pretty well known. If you were a home player, like, say, Boyd McKinney, nobody really outside of your little area knew that you liked the music or played the music, and that's the truth. Let's see. Let me read you just a partial list of some local women musicianers from this county. And if you hear your family name mentioned, you can let out a squeal if you want to. "That's Mama!" Or if there's somebody that you don't like, you can make a noise like that too. We'll take a little census. So this is sort of a census of some of the local families. So there was a Victoria Drawn who played the 5-string banjo. There was an Alma Drawn, and she played the guitar. No Drawns in here, huh? There was Lula Mae Jones, and she played the piano. There was a Roxy Chenault, but she married a Hutchins, and she played guitar. There was Georgia Bunker, played piano. Yes?
That has to be some of Tanya's people. Is she here?
Say it again.
Is that some of your people? I don't know.
Well, you got to buy the book, don't you? She was a ferocious banjo player. She played with Ernest Creed for a while. There was Mary Ann Krause who played the guitar. These are still all Surrey people. Mrs. Jake Badgett played the guitar. Then there was Lula Creed. Guess what she played? The piano accordion. Yeah, people played old-time music on accordions in this area. Not many. There was Sadie Scott and Lily Scott who played
Banjo.
They played banjo. He remembers them. He's getting so old I can't remember. Violin for anything. There was Julie Jarrell, who, as you know, played the harmonica. There are pictures of her out in the lobby next door. And Susie Turney, who played both fiddle and banjo, and she taught Ben Ben and Charlie, according to the stories. Edith Jarrell played a little piano and banjo. Fern Ramey played guitar and sang like a mockingbird. Cindy McKinney played guitar and
Banjo and piano.
Piano.
But she played banjo too.
Oh, she did?
Yes.
Oh.
Seconded.
She seconded?
Yes.
How do you know?
I heard her.
Oh. All right, we'll put her in the next edition of the book
She
then.
wasn't as good as Kirk, but she was good on the banjo.
See how all these discoveries happened? This happened to me hundreds of times over the years. Kevin, you don't know anything, He did or she did. And so that's how they got stuck. And so now you know that she played the banjo too. That was a big thing when you played the banjo, You could either fram it and just wail the hell out of the banjo, or you could second it and try to follow the melody line that the fiddle player's doing. Otherwise, as Calvin Cole would say, he's just a framer. He's just making noise. He doesn't even know what the tune sounds like. He did. Remember that? Okay, so you're trying to think, well, where's my family? There was a woman named Hattie Center, some kin to Spurgeon Center, I think. She played the banjo. There was Margie Martin, played the banjo. There was Cinder Martin, played the banjo. Just whip through them here. There was Helen Bertram, played auto harp and guitar. Etta Snow played the banjo. Round Peak musicians. Essie Snow on the banjo. Renee Sykes on the banjo. Willie Simmons, who was that? No Simmons is here. Willie Simmons played the piano. Mary Ellen Simmons played the banjo. Evie Reynolds was an early banjo player. Cervelli Johnson was a great fiddle player. No Johnsons here. Margaret Miller played the guitar. Molly Smith Snow played both the banjo. Do you know about her?
My mother-in-law.
Oh my God.
Oh, actually, she was the mother of my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law also played.
So who was the mother-in-law?
Fergie Smith Bowman.
Verdi? Oh yeah.
Married to Charlie.
Right, married to Charlie Bowman.
Yeah. I met you at their house. I was there when you were interviewing Charlie.
You know, I kind of remember your face from 30 years ago.
Oh, it is 30. I know.
It was at least 30 years
We
ago.
both looked a little different then, shall we say.
That's a nice way of putting it. I think Paul Brown brought us out there that day.
That's correct.
It was a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
There was a Rosa Smith who played the accordion. Yeah, here's Virgie Snow Bowman, banjo and accordion. Lurie McKinney played the banjo. Nellie Lowe played the guitar. And then there was Rosanne Lowe Gallion. Anybody remember her? Lived in Low Gap. Did you know that she played banjo and guitar? Yep. She was about the first woman in Surrey that I interviewed. So I would like to read a little memorial for her, right? Because this was the first old-time musician's funeral that I went to. I had no idea what to expect. So, not to get you sad and weepy, but you can get sad and weepy if you want to. Okay, I'll be back in a month. Yeah, why don't you all play it? Yeah, I'll try this. See you next week. Now, that wasn't too sorry, was it?
No.
I don't want to over-flatter these guys, but you know, there's nobody that plays better than them. That's just the truth of the matter and the law of the land. So let's give another hand. And now Chester's all embarrassed looking at me. Bragging, yeah. Okay, well, it took the 3 minutes to find this little memorial to sign a little galleon. So anybody here who doesn't know where Low Gap is? Because if you don't know, just ask your neighbor. So this is dated December 4th, 1986. From a pew on the west side of Charity Church, I look out the window up the high, gentle slope of Galleon Hill. Amid that collection of field stones and headstones and earthen mounds, Signe will be shortly taken to her rest. She died last night from a painful cancer of the spine, from which she suffered many months. When Dorsey, her son, and his wife Marion bent over to give her a last kiss in her chapel casket, I know that they're expressing not only their painful release of her, but their acknowledgement that at last she has been released into peace and calm. Signe Low Galleon, born 1912, died 1986. Well, that got you kind of quiet, didn't it? She was a pretty interesting woman when I met her, and I got into talking about various other galleons who played, and she mentioned her son Cullen, who was a fine banjo and guitar player, both, seems to be. And she had ancestors on both the low side of the family as well as the galleon side of the family. And some of them were pretty old. There was that fellow Houston Galleon, who was ancient, and there was Friel Galleon, and all these people basically played fiddle, and then a little bit later on, the banjo when they came along. Now, out of those 1,300 musicians that I mentioned to you, some well-known, some kind of obscure, if you read the Surrey County chapter and the Low Gap chapter in here, you'll find about 300 musicians listed in there. These are not bluegrass musicians. They played much older music than that. 300 of them. Now, if what people were telling me is correct, only about 20 of those were women musicians. Now, there probably were more women who played. Usually when people like these three would come over to your house and knock on the door and say, let's crack out a tune or two. If you were a girl or a woman, you weren't expected to play, even if you knew how to play, unless you really kind of bossed them around and said, just sit down and shut up, and I'm going to play the banjo tonight. Now, if you said that, then these sorry fellows would say, well, all right, if you insist. Okay, you are pretty good, and you can play alongside this fellow down here with his banjo. Just don't play it too loud. Well, if you're the girl banjo player, what are you going to do? You're going to try to shut him down, right? Or at least follow him note for note anyway. So women were, unless they were a little bit on the aggressive side, they didn't get the coverage, especially in the old days, that men players did. And so now we see a slight turnaround when you have a program devoted to women of old-time music. Now I'll read you another little passage in a second, because I know that they want to play a tune that they're going to dedicate to all the women musicians over the decades in Surrey County. And they get to pick the tune. Notice that they're nodding their gray heads right now thinking, what's it going to be? You're the fiddler. He's the leader of the band. Old Molly Hair. Notice that they didn't bring any women players along with them today. You noticed that, didn't you? Wait, we don't have any, or we won't have any?
We don't have any.
We like to tell lies on each other here. We have for years and years.
Trish plays at my place. She plays at my place.
Yeah, she does some of your bass runs on the guitar. All right, and any people here related to any Simmonses or Hampys? No? All right, well now, this is one of the most interesting women I met. She would have been born 1905, 1910. So she's gone to Beulah Land by now. So she was Etta Simmons, and one April afternoon, I rode her over in my pickup truck, just as the sun is setting. Etta lives by herself in a house on the Haystack Road, around the heart of Old Thurman. I'm barely in the door when she begins yakking away in a friendly way, and she's knocking away on the banjo. She dances across the floor. Now, she was about 5'1", as I remember. I had to tune my mandolin fast to keep up with this wildcat. His only scattered, limited talk as his visit with her consists mainly of tunes. First off is, guess what? Sally Ann, played quite fast. Then she says, this is another one that I can pick on the same chord. And out she comes with Fly Around, My Pretty Little Miss. Etta's custom is to play only the first part of Fly Around. Then immediately we're playing Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. I believe you all know a tune like that, don't you? So at the end of that tune, she actually does pause for a minute to tell me a few things. She started picking the banjo with thumb and forefinger at about age 6, encouraged by her mother. Every utterance is exclamatory in Etta's style of talking as well as in her way of playing. She was like that. This diminutive person heats and cooks with her wood stove, but she does play in both Freeland and finger-picking style. But she never uses picks on her fingers. Then she plays more pretty girls than one in the two-finger style. Then she attempts to stun her interviewer by saying that she has made some music all the way over to Dobson and at Mount Airy on the radio and at Gaylights and Yankville, Glade Valley and Wilkesboro and Sparty. She went all the way over to Sparty. So she wants to lift over to the Mountain Park Fiddle Festival next week, so I promised to take her over there. So this is the story I want to tell you here. Etta's mother was a Barker from Virginia. Her father was Newton Blackburn, who was also a banjo player. All of us could pick and just have a big time. My mother could dance too. My dad could dance a hole in the floor. Whenever Christmas came, we'd always go and play every night. We didn't miss a night. Lord, dance till 12 or 1 o'clock. And then she told me to put this in capital letters. Boy, it'll just tell you where we've had a great time. I used to help my daddy hew cross ties, and we'd loan tannin bark at Thurman in the boxcars to go to Winston. We'd plow, do anything. Us girls worked just like men. And I married the sorriest man in the county. And here's this little 5-foot woman telling me this, hands on her hips, you know. He was the sorriest thing. He'd come in this room right here. He would dress up and wash and primp to the table. Then he'd get right up after he ate, and he would call a friend to come get him. I told that man not to bring him back home again. If he did, I'd blow the tires out from under him. The story is not over yet. If my husband aimed to treat me that way, I need not feed him anymore. I work just like a man, and I'll still work just like a man. You got to get out there and bust the wood right now. I sure can do it. But the doctor told me to cut down on my working. So here's this little woman, and she goes to the doctor, and he says, you know, you're 90 years old. How long are you going to keep up this bunch of foolishness? And she said, well, maybe I'll buy an electric stove, too. Took part on that, but I don't have any wood in the house. So she was a ball of fire, and she got a special award at the Mountain Park Fiddlers Festival. These guys had played there before. So she would have gotten that award in about 1988, I guess. And sometimes she would play with the guitar player, and sometimes she would play with the fiddle player, and the music that they played sounded just like this. Okay, let's play a waltz that Etta Simmons might have played. You guys want to play a waltz? That's better than a waltz, isn't it? Oh. Well, I'll talk a little bit more, and then if they want to have one final tune, they can be thinking about it a long time ago.
Breaking up Christmas, that'd be good.
Don't start yet.
We ain't started yet.
I know you're anxious to. Have you ever heard of a tune called Breaking Up Christmas? Did you hear it last night if you were down here? There's actually a tradition in Ireland called Women's Christmas. I forgot about that. And it happens probably 10 or 12 days after December 25th. And a fellow told me once, or a woman told me once, that was to honor all the women in Ireland. So I thought, I'll try to remember that. So Women's Christmas. So in the book here, Charlie and Virgie let me Charlie and Virgie Bowman. Here's a photograph of them, and it's typical of the photographs that people in the book had available. Now, sometimes if Chester would say, well, you know, I learned a lot from old so-and-so, and I got a picture of him. Peach, well, you want to borrow it and put it in the book? I did. So the book's got about 150 photographs of old-time musicians. And the deal was this. Chester would let me, say, the photograph of so-and-so, and I would take it over to Kelvin's photography studio. Kelvin.
Severs.
Yep. And I'd get 2 copies made. And I'd keep a copy for the book, and then I'd give Chet here his original back and a free copy. That was his little reward for offering to lend me the photograph to put in the book. And that happened with every single family. There was only one fellow who was unwilling to lend a photograph. He thought I would cut it up or something. But everybody else said, Kevin, that's fine. As long as you're going to put them in the book, yes, let's do it. And so all of these photographs, for the most part, come from families who wanted to see their relations put in the book. A few of them are professional, I think. A few of them come from other photographs, for other photographers. But that's the way the deal worked, you know. And they sort of said, why don't you just satiate right on in here, Kevin? I think we'll have some pintos and onions. And we'll talk about my family, and be sure to put that photograph in the book, and be sure to put that photograph in the book, sorry. And thank you for doing this. And then in Cana one time, or maybe up at Fancy Gap, a woman came up to me and said, Kevin, I'm Calvin Cole's niece mate. And I just want to thank you for doing that book and putting that nice picture of Vi and Calvin in the book. And she said, we don't have many books in my house. We've just got 2 now. Got the Holy Bible, and on top of that, stacked on top of it, we keep your book. So I was tempted to say, oh, you think that book is that holy? And then I thought, Kevin, just lay off. But I thought that was pretty touching, but it's a family document, you know. Remember how many of the old family Bibles you could put down who married who in the back? You know, Abraham begot Louisa, and you would have all that family information in the back of the book. So I think this book helps to do that too. At one time, I went to the library, maybe over at the community college, and I looked at the federal census, the U.S. Census, who was done in 1840. Well, now that's many years ago. Not many of you are old enough to remember the census taken of 1840, but they took the census just like they do now. You know, they come knock on your door and, who lives here? Let me wet a pencil and, do you have any daughters? Do you have any sons? Do you have any illegitimate dogs and cats? And so if we didn't have the U.S. Census, we wouldn't know a lot that we know now. So I remember thinking that when I looked at the 1840 census, I think probably it was on microfilm, I thought, oh, look here, here's some Cochrans. They had some musicians in that family. And just down the road, according to the census, because that's the way the census works, you know, they go down the road, they go down the street. So if your family is listed next to this family, that'll help you say, oh yeah, maybe we had a joining land, you know. So I went through that 1840 census, and here are just 20 Surrey County families that were turned out to have old-time musicians in later years, and maybe even in the 1840s. So you're going to probably know every one of these families that I'll list. Any Cochrans here? Any Creeds here? How about Hawks? Maybe you're deaf. Any Lows?
Yeah.
All right. Any McKinneys? Oh, I run out of the list. Okay, well, there were at least 21 families. Who's this lady creeping up on us here? Let's put her in Chester's place. Sutphens, yeah. I want to give you a taste of some of the oldest musicians, some women, mostly men, that I was able to track down and see. Just to give you another taste, that music has just been around here a long time. And we can say, oh, music's been around here since the creation of the earth. Well, that's not quite true, but it's pretty close to true, and you'll see why. For instance, there was Kenny Lowe, born in 1833, who played the banjo. And some people didn't know that Kenny Lowe played the banjo. And Joe Lowe. From pneumonia or flu. Oh, it is? Yeah. Tell him that over the mic.
Joe Lowe, I happened to come across his banjo several years ago, and it's in the museum up at Mount Airy Museum of History. But they said, that's Charlie Lowe's uncle.
Okay.
And said, I think Joe died in 1925 or 27. I have to look it
He
up.
was young.
No, he was an old man to be Charlie's uncle.
Oh, I think about Tony Lowe. Okay.
Tony, yeah. But that's just part of it. And we got Charlie Lowe's banjo is back at the museum now. So if anybody wants to see the old banjos that they play, they're on display. We got Kyle Creed's banjo up there also, thanks to Mr. Ford. But anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff we're getting in the museum. It's a Man Up Museum of History. I'm not advertising it, but I'm just telling you where it's at.
He knows where it's at.
What instruments is that? But that was a funny thing. I come across that banjo, Charlie's banjo, and I called Kurt. And he said, I'll be up there a little bit. He said, I got a skin head to fit on it, so he brought it with me, we put it together, and they was playing it.
Good morning, turn it loose.
I took it up to Kevin the same way. He said, he played it for a long time. He said, I can't get rid of this banjo, it just won't keep on playing.
Well, speaking of banjos, some of you know that all the hides stretched across the banjo weren't necessarily plastic in the early days. Well, duh, Kevin, there was no such thing as plastic. So who can tell me the kind of skin, animal skin, was used in the banjo? What? Groundhog? Cat skin?
Seal.
Quite true. Seal, yeah. Now he's trying to start the story going that Calvin Cole, who used to live up in Pensacola, that Calvin Cole, great banjo player, said at one point, we'll just say 1920, he had a banjo at one point with a cat skin, and he said it played pretty well, and his wife Vi, without cracking a smile, said, "Well, what did the cat have to say about it?" And Calvin, not literally his wife, had the final word, said, "Well, he kind of knew, kind of piteously." Now, part of that story is probably true, I would guess. So here's some other really early players. Zach Payne, the fiddle player, born in 1845. Pep McKinney, his neighbor, fiddle player, born in 1846. Old Frankie Jenkins, born 1849. Houston Gallion, one of the oldest ones, 1853. Then there was this mysterious character that lived sort of like the Toenail Gap historians where they live. I had to say it. A man named Sam Fortner. He was a very, very hard fellow to track down. Played the banjo, born about 1839. So we're getting past there. He liked to hang out with old Rufus Jarrell because they would make a little something to drink and then they would drink it. When they ran out, they would make a little something else to drink. You understand that they were retired from the Civil War, and they had a right to get themselves as drunk as they wanted to, apparently. So there was an interesting black guy that I would like to know more about in Wilkes County. He was born in 1839, and his name was Riley Hill. The two oldest musicians that I found were early relatives of Eni Rutherford. Anybody here remember how Eni used to play the banjo? Oh, you do. Oh, you must play the banjo yourself. That's why you remember? Well, Eni said that their family research, the Rutherfords over in the Gold Hill section, was that they had two people born in the 1700s, both fiddle players, Andrew Rutherford and the one who was not Andrew Rutherford. I think maybe they were brothers or they were related somehow. But they were the two earliest fellows that I ever heard about. And Eni sort of suspected that he knew where they were buried. If you went down to the river and poked around under the tulip poplar, you would stub your toe on a field stone. And, well, of course they're buried there. Who knows? But they were the earliest musicians. Notice that they were both fiddle players. And it's not just that Grayson had early fiddle players or Surrey had early fiddle players or any other of these counties had early fiddle players. Everybody had early fiddle players before the banjo came along in these counties. Sometimes people would make their own fiddles. Sometimes, somehow or other, the fiddles came with the immigrants who came over to settle in these counties from Europe. Now, you know, I hope, and Kurt will back me up, that a fiddle is a fairly delicate instrument. You know, you drop it on the floor, that's all she wrote for the fiddle. It'll crack open at the crack of dawn. So how the fiddles were carefully guarded, as some huge wooden ship comes bounding across the ocean, how the fiddles survived, don't know. But we know that they were very common in Europe too. And somebody told me a couple of years ago, don't know who it was, to give them credit for it, they said, Kevin, in these counties, in the old days, a fiddle was as common as a broom. So that tells you a lot right there. You know, you might have had a bed in the house, and a chair in the house, and a table in the house, and a broom, and you would have a fiddle, sometimes hanging up on the wall, and sometimes with rattlesnake rattles in the fiddle. But the fiddles were there, and a lot of people could scrape out a tune. Some people could do more than scrape out a tune. But the fiddle was really around, you know. Probably if you poke around in your family records, you might say, "Hey, Grandma, anybody play the fiddle in the family?" Well, no. Yes. And so if they think about an old musician or playing, it's probably going to be an old musician or fiddle player. Whether this is in Georgia, or in Maine, or in Louisiana, or, well, not Florida, who knows about someplace like Florida, but in the Carolinas or East Tennessee, there were fiddles around.
Oh, isn't there one more? This is the banger?
I think according to your book here, Peach, I think me and Jarrell learned this off of Pitt McKinney, I believe. Jeannie's ancestor, and we're both related to, or I'm related to Zach Payne, and she's related to Pitt McKinney and Zach Payne.
So is it gonna be a good tune?
You know, it's his best tune.
Play it just like Uncle Pat.
Okay, we won't ask them to play another tune unless they're just dying to, but I'll give it one little brief reading to wrap us up here, unless you want to hear 3 or 4 more hours of my foolishness here. Anybody know where Scraptown was?
Oh, yeah.
All right. No, I'm careful what I'm going to say about it. Anybody know where Garbrally is?
Oh, yes, yes.
Anybody know where the Bear Trail is?
Down there or back there?
I know. So here's a story, probably comes from the 1940s or 1950s, I guess. It's not a musical story. It's a story about wild times out in the countryside. You know where Gabe's Hill is? Gabe Edwards Hill? Oh, well. Halloween is one of those occasions during the year when peculiar events happen in Scraptown. And last year, it was just a given that the state law, and state patrolmen are always referred to, the law would definitely make it a point to cruise the winding roads that join the Berg and Flower Gap, and Scraptown and Cana. It's not a large area overall, and the law could cover the ground without a great deal of difficulty since they had cars. But no patrolman would have come from Scraptown, and therefore that patrolman would have no way of knowing the terrain or the people. That makes sense, doesn't it? Besides, Scraptowners have continued their lives relatively undisturbed by outside influences for maybe 150 years. So I think that's what Chester was getting at. You can imagine the patrol car roaring across this very short bridge, only to come screeching to a stop to avoid smashing into an immense oak tree that had been carefully felled across the road as soon as the dark had come to Scraptown that night. Some of you, I hope, already know the story. And one can imagine the anger and frustration with a feeling of relief experienced by the lawman, followed by the howl and smoke from his tires as he quickly backs up across that bridge. The nation of trees must seem to him to be on its attack as he halts a second time. He had seen a second mammoth tree thunder down onto the road, neatly hemming him in. The mouse is in the trap. An intruder has been spied. The law is of no use. And in fact, he is a stranger. So we must freeze this little picture as stones and eggs pelt the lawman's car, giving him a message about intrusion into no man's land. Now we shouldn't laugh, but let's give a hand for that story. There was, of course, the old days, and nobody would treat the lawman like that anymore, except in Charlottesville, where I live. I've been told time and time again, Kevin, do not go out to Bacon Hollow at night. Do not go out into Mutton Hollow at night. Oh, why? Says me. My eyes just big as saucers. Well, Kevin, if you want to go out there, and this is in Greene County outside Charlottesville, you got to take somebody with you who knows the area. And I would say, oh, you mean just like Scraptown? Just like the Bear Trail? They would say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But don't you go up in that place? I'd say, well, are they mistreating animals up there? Are they chopping up cars and selling them illegally? They would just start chuckling. I would say, oh, they're distilling something up there? And the other person would just laugh and say, go on home, Kevin. Just stay away there. So that, I think, is going to be the end of our little presentation this afternoon. I hope you have enjoyed it. Hope some of you who have heard some stories about some of the people in your family enjoy those stories. I hope, of course, that you will also buy some copies of the book, which I will happily sign for you. If you want one, you don't have to look at the sticker price of $30, because you get them, because you're my friends. You get them for half price. Half price today. 350 pages, 3.5 pounds of book. almost as heavy as your bicycle. Okay, let's give the musicians a hand, okay? Okay, Chet has a story.
I just want to tell about
Can you hear me?
Tommy and Fred was coming across, it's what, 89 is now. But it,
His brother Fred.
he just did Tommy and Fred. Anyway, they had a half a gallon of liquor, and kept one of them carrying the fiddle, and they fell off the football. And one of them said to the other, didn't break your fiddle, did you? Or was it, did you break your liquor? Anyway, they said that they could get another a fiddle, but you can't get no more liquor. I figured you had that in there. Good.
No, that's the first time I heard that story. But you know, in the old days, everybody had stories like that. You know, first of all, you couldn't put a financial value on the liquor because you wanted to drink it. You didn't want to.
But the fiddle should have been a whole lot more valuable than the liquor.
Well, some people would say that. Now there are fiddles like the old Zach Payne fiddle or the Molly fiddle or the old Scott family banjo. They're, we might say, worthless. I mean, of high worth. But there are other instruments that you could play and think, shoot, I'm not playing that instrument again. So they might not be worth as much as a gallon of liquor. All right, so much for that. I'll be down here with some copies of the book, so you can come and talk to the musicians, come talk to me. The bathroom's that way. You don't have to take out the liquor out of your pocket here. That's it. Let's start applauding for them. I bet you they'll play a final tune.